AT&T, and you know them because they're probably in your life somewhere, have been the biggest supporters of OAN, One America Network, the most conservative thing that you can find on the air anywhere. AT&T has poured tens of millions of dollars into the Fringe channel, with an OAN accountant testifying in 2020 that 90% of the network's revenue came from a contract with AT&T owned affiliates. Now, of course, you would want to be on an AT&T owned affiliate if you were a startup cable network. That they have a broad reach, and they also own DirecTV, which is exactly where you would want to position yourself to an older conservative audience, because it's television. And even though I don't consider myself old or conservative, whether you might think I'm old, I do watch and have DirecTV, and this gives me pause. Reuters cited a 2019 deposition in which the founder of OAN, and that's Robert Herring Sr., a Trump supporter, someone who asked Trump out loud to why he wasn't calling on OAN reporters at White House press conferences. This is what he said when he asked. This is what he said in this deposition. They told us they wanted a conservative network. When they said that, I jumped to it and built one. Smart thing, right? OAN founder and chief executive Robert Herring Sr. said of AT&T executives during a 2019 deposition, according to Reuters. So here he's being faced with, okay, we will give you 90% of your funding. We need something in the conservative space. You're the guy to do it. Of course he's going to do it, right? He did it, and he did it with an exclamation point. Since then, AT&T remains a vital source of funding for OAN, which has gone on to do damage to journalism, damage arguably to the country by propagating the lies and putting them out there, and being a bullhorn for the lies of Donald Trump. And 90% of OAN's revenue came from a contract. This is from the Reuters article, with AT&T owned television platforms, including satellite broadcaster DirecTV. According to 2020 sworn testimony by an OAN accountant, Herring has testified he was offered $250 million for OAN in 2019. Shipman goes on, without the DirecTV detail, the accountant said under oath, the network's value would be zero. Remember, he was offered $250 million, without AT&T, zero. Court filings cited in the report are said to show that one 5-year deal with AT&T alone brought One American News about $57 million, thanks to monthly fees included in the agreement. Now, here is what is puzzling to me. The fact that they said they had so much progressive programming on the left, or programming on the left, they were crying out for something that was conservative to fill that spot. Cenk, that on its surface is unbelievable, but it also makes you wonder about the money, the corporate money that's going not into just these candidates. We were talking to Andrew Yang today, not just the candidates. This is going into the networks that are propping up those candidates.
Yeah, 100%. This story reveals so much about how media actually works. And so let's take it one at a time. Let's start with what Michael said. Apparently an AT&T executive reached out to these guys and said, there's already 7 news networks on the left, and we need one other than Fox News on the right. What 7 is he talking about? That's insane. So look, I wanna be really clear here, guys, because right wing has done propaganda in this country for the last 4 or 5 decades, saying that the media is liberal. Now, you need to understand that there are 2 different sets of issues here, social and economic. On the social issues, not hating gay people, black people, etc., the media is generally liberal. Okay, yes, they don't think black people or gay people should have less rights than other people. By the way, if you say, oh no, Republicans don't believe that, yes they do. They don't think that gay people should be allowed to get married, should be able to adopt. That is less rights than straight people. They think trans people shouldn't be allowed to go into certain bathrooms, participate in certain sports. I said that is less rights. So is the media generally liberal in not being barbaric to fellow Americans? I would say generally yes. But on economic issues, they're deeply conservative. I mean, every time Bernie Sanders went to a debate, they'd say, how are you gonna pay for that? How are you gonna pay for that? Whenever it was about something that would help you guys, healthcare for your family, higher wages for your family, etc. When it comes to war, the mainstream media seems to love it and revel in it. When it comes to lower taxes for the rich and corporations, you never get the question of how you're going to pay for that. So to say that there are 7 liberal networks is insane. The only one that is half liberal, and here I use liberal in both the positive and pejorative way, is MSNBC. And so, but half of their hosts are Republicans. So, and economically, they're not very different either. So, but from a corporate perspective, no, even that is too much. We need more and more conservative news. Why? That goes to point number 2. Part of the deal was, now you just go say conservative stuff, that's great. I assume the same propaganda as always, lower taxes for corporations, low regulations, anti-labor, lower wages. They love that propaganda, that helps them. But on top of that, they layered in here, you're not to ever speak badly of AT&T. These are supposed to be journalists. That's hilarious. Now that you know this, every single person on OAN is a joke. They don't care about the news at all. And they literally have a deal where they're not allowed to tell you the truth about their main benefactor, okay? So that's AT&T in this case. And so, and second of all, they said you should do positive stories, especially about our mergers. When we tell you that corporations care about making money, everyone goes, of course, right? Except people in corporate media who go, I don't know, corporations trying to make money and then manipulating the media to do that. Well, golly gee, they would never, except they just did. And then one more here, and then we'll go back and forth a little bit. But the $57 million, guys, that's basically free money. By the way, I did the math on it. I'm in this industry. That is a very conservative number. At about 12 cents a subscriber, given how many subscribers DirecTV had, that number is likely much larger. And then the company, their own accountant admits on the record, would be worth nothing without the AT&T deal. And they could have possibly sold it for $250 million. That's a rich Republican basically being handed $250 million. And then by the way, on OAN, then they'll turn around and go, oh, you just have to work hard. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. No, you just ask a corporation, hey, you want to give me $250 million so I'll do propaganda for you? And they go, absolutely, do it. And that's what OAN is. It's a corporate propaganda outlet. And it's outrageous that AT&T did this. At the same time, Michael, it's also semi-obvious in that we certainly didn't know the details of this. No one would have guessed that AT&T was propping up the most vile so-called network in the country that promotes conspiracy theories and lies and tries to undermine our democracy. That part's not obvious. But what is obvious is basically what my wife told me when I was telling her about the story. She's like, Cenk, why do you outrage that? Conservatives, in this case OAN, told AT&T they'll do whatever AT&T wants, so they got money. You tell them you won't do what corporations want, so they don't give you money. It's like, well, when you put it that way, that makes sense. On the other hand, that's deeply corrupt, and that's why we have the terrible media that we do.
And then, of course, your wife is like, can you imagine the house that we could have lived in if you started a conservative network?
That's actually true.
It's true. I mean, we know it's true now as we look at this, and the other side of this cries for the FCC to get involved in labeling what a news network is, right? I mean, it's fine if AT&T wants to spend the money to have diversity of opinion on their channels. That's fine, but they put this OAN in their news block and they call it news. They shouldn't be allowed to do that, so people at least know that this is propaganda and it's made up. AT&T, for their part, responded to this Reuters article. AT&T spokesman Jim Greer disputed that figure, the money, the 90 million, in comments to Reuters, declined to specify how much the company has given to OAN. It's not 90 million is what they're saying. It could be 91, could be 89. We've always sought to provide a wide variety of content and programming that would be of interest to customers and do not dictate or control programming on channels we carry, Greer was quoted telling Reuters, and that's exactly what I'm saying. That's fine. They don't have to dictate what these channels are putting out there, but they at least have to tell the viewers what these channels are and clearly what they are not, and that's what OAN is not. It is not news, and I think you would agree with that, Cenk.
Yeah, look, couple points here. First, when they dispute the figure, that means they are not disputing that the rest of the story is true. So if it wasn't true at all, they would say, "Oh, that's outrageous. We didn't make any deal with these guys. That's nuts." No, we didn't give them money so that they would do this propaganda for us. They're not saying any of that. They're just saying, well, the number's not exactly right. And by the way, it might be higher, right? And they say, well, we're not technically telling them what to say. Yeah, because that was the original deal you made in the beginning. So you don't have to keep repeating it every day, but that doesn't really deny the story at all. So a lot of these decisions are deeply political. AT&T, even from their own non-denial denial, clearly states that they did have a deal like this. And by the way, the OAN executives said it under oath. There's no question about it. They said AT&T told us that we should do positive stories about them, and especially positive stories about their mergers, and that we shouldn't criticize them, and we agreed to that deal. So that was the deal. And they're still not denying that portion of the deal in any effective way, as you saw from that quote. So
yeah, they're just disputing the number. They're not disputing anything else. But quickly, before we finish this, very quickly, I want people who don't know what OAN is. This is just an example of the stuff that's on there. Don't look them up. It's garbage. The channel employs an on-air reporter, this is from the Huffington Post, who is simultaneously working for Kremlin-funded propaganda outlet Sputnik, and who falsely claimed that former Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton gave Antifa protesters $800,000 for weapons. I mean, that's whole cloth, made up out of whole cloth. Far-right media activist Jack Posobiec, who pushed the Pizzagate conspiracy, is a correspondent on that network. It's not anything more than ridiculousness, and and now we see where it comes from. And I'm not naive enough to think that companies don't give money to these networks and try and prop them up, but they have to also not say that they allow them to say that they are what they are not, and that's what these people are doing here. That's what AT&T is doing. And like Cenk said, when you hear these guys talk about, when you hear this spokesman Greer for AT&T saying they're not disputing what's in the story, essentially by only disputing the amount of money, that means there's something really bad going on. It also means somebody else should get the NFL package so people don't have to have DirecTV to watch all the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But last thing here, Michael, they mentioned Sputnik there, and it's funny because I was going to use that same analogy. So when Sputnik does obvious propaganda for the Russian government, we say it's bad, right? And state-owned media is mixed. It's a giant range from PBS, BBC, Al Jazeera, all the way to Sputnik, right? And so how much is Al Jazeera allowed to criticize the Qatar government? Probably not very much at all. On the other hand, they do some good journalism from time to time. BBC is funded by the British government, but so from time to time they do excellent journalism. But at the same time, are they influenced by the fact that they're in favor of the British government in general? Of course they are. But I want you guys to understand, it really isn't much different. Let's take the worst of the actors, Sputnik, right? Their propaganda is brazen and over the top, right? But how is that different than doing propaganda for a corporation? It's just who you're doing the propaganda for. Sputnik does it for a nation state, and OAN does it for something arguably more powerful, a multinational corporation. Those corporations are now ruling a lot of our governments. And it's not that surprising that at the end, these corporate entities that are now more powerful than most nation states would start to have their own networks in order to deceive you. The idea isn't to manufacture news, it's to manufacture consent for their corporate rule. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.